That previous scene is from near where I live. The water in the foreground is Lake Sammamish. I live on it. In the background is Seattle, and behind it is the Olympic Mountains. That's what keeps the hurricanes away. All right. I came here to entertain you after lunch by thinking about where is the intelligence in my machine anyway, and where could I put it in, and why I might be nervous about that. So, my goal is not that you walk out of here thinking, that guy knows his stuff, because that sort of doesn't matter. You all work in electronics. You all work in the world of Google. That means your jobs are an open book exam. What I expect is that you will come out of here, at least some of you, thinking, how does my product work anyway? Where do I want to put intelligence in it that it isn't already? If some of you come out of here with that outcome, I win. So, I'm going to cover, this is a tour of several kinds of devices, and I'm going to be following where the intelligence is. That intelligence might be in the network, it might be in your hand, it might be in your house, it might be in the cloud. I need to stay close to the mic here. So, let's go back 150 years. First, telephones. It's pretty simple. It's got a microphone and a speaker. It has an audio duplexer. And since the telephone companies, even at that time, did not want 4 wires, 2 was enough. Now, there was intelligence in the system. It wasn't in the device. The intelligence was in the central offices. This works nicely, but it doesn't scale. From an article a century ago, somebody predicted that if current trends continued, soon the phone companies would need to employ every single young woman on the planet to work in the central offices. Like I say, it doesn't scale. And if they were going to do that, they should hire men too. So the telephone companies built national networks of people with the simple devices talking to intelligence who would do the switching to go to another device and do more switching to get to the second user. What we followed that with is phones with auto dialers. So there was very simple intelligence in the central offices to convert your audio address, your phone number. They had to invent phone numbers for people so that you could do this automatically rather than manually, and then develop the equipment that allowed you to put it into the system so a machine could handle it instead of a person. This is how we got where we were, and except for going mobile, we're still there. So, like I say, we invented automatic calling equipment to pick up that information. Second invention, radios. Marconi invented this stuff a century ago. Early radio network operators put together big systems with sources of information and radios to listen to it on. The user controls are turn it on and off, manually tuning that dial, big variable capacitor somewhere, and volume so you can stand to listen to it. And we, the intelligence, the users controlled some of the intelligence. Is a radio signal quality good enough or not? Maybe I have to torque some things, or maybe even use squelch and other controls that are now only used by radio amateurs in order to figure out whether my signal's good or not. And you listen to the actual radio station, which would occasionally say, hi, I'm this channel in this place, so you know you're on the right thing. The media, of course, was just the content, was speakers first and then music. So the system diagram is the same thing. There is a radio source, a talker, or somebody playing their stuff, and you go through an amplifier, a tuner, and a power amp. Goes out of the air. How many every 1,000 watts it takes. Comes into a simple receiver which you manually control, an amplifier which you control the volume of, and a speaker you listen to. That's how simple it is. Third device, we've talked about it today. We had a keynote this morning on the future of television. I found it very entertaining. Here's an early one. I didn't go all the way back to monochrome. I just thought I'd pick with color here. And so, of course, we scaled up radios to deliver more media, and then to color the media. Still, we do on and off. We do video luminance, video chroma, and video intensity. Did anyone here remember those manual controls? Some of us older types do. So, and we got the quality, we got, you know, with the snow or real pictures, TV station announcements, and we would get whatever they were playing, either live or recorded. System diagram then looks like this. Microphones and speakers on the source, amps and speakers, coming back out to speakers and CRTs. Are there any questions so far? I should say that I like taking questions. The reason is, first of all, it breaks up the thing. It keeps people awake. Usually if somebody has a question to ask, several more people in the audience would like to know the same answer, but are too afraid to go to the microphone. So, I expect questions. It's not rude. All right. Getting into the time where I was a working engineer, the microprocessor revolution that started the year before I graduated at Berkeley, 1971, Intel 4004, changed everything in consumer electronics. Instead of being passive consumers of network content, the users controlled the video and the audio displays, subject to the capabilities of the first device. And I brought show and tell. There were two engineers who designed the guts of this thing. My boss died in 1994. I'm the other one. So I'm an old guy. And I have to tell you, it was so much fun. We would think to ourselves, they're paying me to do this? I would go to work grateful that there wasn't a little box with a coin slot on it that I had to put money in order to keep working. It was that good. Stepping back from the personal. So this is one of the original devices. It has game select buttons, power on and off. It has buttons to choose the difficulty for each person. So, a story. Several years after I worked on this, I had a 6-year-old child. He went to school. He came back, and I said, Michael, what'd you learn in school today? He said, I learned to play handball. And he meant the big, soft, round balls. I said, I have something to show you. And I went to the garage, and I dug this out, and I connected it to our analog TV, because that's the only kind we had in those days. And I set up a cartridge that I had written called Video Olympics, which had handball, which is sort of like Pong, except both of you are on one side smacking against the same wall. Because he was 6 years old and I was 38 years old, I put my difficulty on high and his on low. Well, he mastered this very quickly. We were playing at the same difficulty level soon after, and I'm talking about minutes, not hours. He had the reflexes of a cobra, you know, and I'm 38. So he said, Dad, this is hecka fresh. And I thought, oh my God, I'm now the people you shouldn't trust because I'm over 30. Because I had never heard these expressions before. All I knew was he was happy. He wants to inherit this thing. Anyway, the system wrote a cartridge. This one here is a screenshot of one of these things. Myself and a guy named Larry Wagner wrote this early cartridge. So we're now putting intelligence out of the system into the box. The inside has a CPU system, local I/O ports for consoles and switches and joysticks. It has video and audio out, which is now synthetic. Instead of going out over an antenna, it's going on a modulated RF cable. This thing here, to your analog TV set. And what you get is synthetic video and synthetic audio rather than live video and live audio. We kept evolving rapidly after the microprocessor revolution started. This is an early command line PC. Most of you recognize it as the first Apple. It would do personal productivity as crudely as it did, and it had some external mass storage. I'm sorry, Tom is not here to enjoy this fact. And if you're playing a game called Zork, its displays were not moving characters, they were strings of text. And the inside, it isn't much different from what you just saw for the video game. The display is obviously different. You have a real keyboard, not just console switches and a joystick. But it also generates synthetic video and audio and drives it on a modulated RF cable. So, we kept evolving. This is the first, or one of the most, I would say this is the first successful graphical-oriented PC. Windows followed it and took over the market for a while, but in my opinion, this was the first. And because we now needed to point on a complicated display, we needed mice or something else to give position to the machine, not just controls. So here's an example of a Windows 95 screen. This is at the point where Windows was stable enough to be useful and still did a lot. I worked at Microsoft from 92 to 2000. And in this case, there are a lot of graphic things to get to and a lot of graphic things to control. I'm using a Windows machine right now. I'm sure you're all familiar with them. So the inside of the system got smaller and smaller for the same amount of functionality, but in fact it got larger. So we get larger CPUs, we have local I/O ports, so keyboards and pointers, we have mass storage that might be removable, we still have synthetic video and audio to drive this complicated display. This is where I think things start getting interesting. All of the devices that I've been talking about so far have either analog controls on a luminance chroma, or they have binary things. Is this button pushed or not? Have I moved this joystick or not? This is new. You all had a session not very long ago on haptic controls. How many people here attended that session? Someone told me it was packed. So, okay. Would have thought more people would be here. In any case, we invented motion sensing and then brought it to entertainment. One of my sons has one of those controllers, but he didn't have it to loan to me. He wouldn't part with it. So, when players use this, they're not sitting and just using a joystick anymore. They're actually up and in motion. And what's inside of it is a lot. That controller has at least an order of magnitude more compute power in it than that game console does. And they're not done. So obviously it has motion sensing, rotation sensing, a few keys for a keyboard, and it has a speaker back into it so you can do rumbling, so you can give some acoustic feedback to motion. With an embedded 16K CPU and a classic Bluetooth radio, although it doesn't say that. Now, I/O gets even more aggressive. How many of you have seen these things before? All right. This device is implementing what Intel now calls perceptual computing. They had a talk about that at main CES show this week. It aggressively looks at you. It focuses on visual and auditory attention. So, for example, inside the software, it can look out and see, here's a skeletal model for the two players that it's focusing on. And so it's figured out how to figure out what they're focusing on and then what to ignore in the background. Given that, it can focus the microphone array on the person it's supposed to be listening to, so it knows who's in charge and what auditory commands to execute. So people can also move in front of it as they do with haptic controls. But this system uses visual and audio feedback, not acoustic and motion feedback, to know what they're supposed to do. Here's a pair of people pretending to play volleyball from their living room. No sand required. No questions yet either. Here's what it looks like inside. I went to the Microsoft company store a few weeks ago. I bought myself this unit, and it cost $150 in the Microsoft company store, so this is not cheap. Notice, or even try to imagine how much compute resources are just built into this thing. It uses USB for I/O, but USB doesn't provide enough power. So it has extra connectors for that. So inside it has a focused microphone array, 3 cameras, and a whole lot of front end. Getting closer to where we are now. BlackBerry. Here is a picture of a lot of the early Blackberries. This is before Apple came along and reinvented it, starting with the Apple iPhone. Small business fact. Apple generates more cash every year from selling iPhones than Microsoft generates for everything. I think this is scary, actually. Apple did, I think, a much better job of marketing applications than Blackberries than RIM did, even though you can download applications to Blackberries too. I'm guessing that Apple got better at marketing applications because they first of all got really good at marketing music with iTunes. Somebody else came along. Google said, we need to be there. We need to be there. We need to be there. Now, especially with Samsung and all their, and Motorola and their friends, there are more Google-powered phones available than there are iOS-powered phones. I don't know how long they'll last. We'll see. What's common to all of them is they download applications to use a lot of the features that are in the phone or in the cloud. We'll get to that. So, Microsoft has come along. There's Windows Phone 8. I have a little bit of luck. The guy who manages the band that I play in has just become the chief program manager for Bluetooth in Windows Phone 8. I have to educate him now. It'll be fun. So, what's inside a modern smartphone? They're astonishingly complicated. I've captured just the big things here. Because it's a phone, it still has a microphone and a speaker. And it has connections for a wired headset in case you still believe in such things. It has USB on it, and on mine, that's the main reason there is to charge it. Everyone uses USB for that. And this one still also supports profiles that run inside that allow it to be used for sharing internet connections or talking to your PC or whatever. They have cameras in them. They have a screen that's multi-touch with soft keys, and they have a slew of radios. They'll have the local wide area network connection, they'll have a Wi-Fi connection, they'll have a Bluetooth connection, they'll have a GPS connection so they know where you are, and they may have an NFC connection for short-range applications. I left off of this diagram that these also frequently have haptic controls. They'll know your direction, they may know your motion. I'm going to demonstrate a feature that uses phone kinds of functionality, but it's now starting to bring in the cloud. Okay, I have an iPad, and what I'm going to demonstrate with this in 2 different ways is Siri. Yes, you can help me. Today, 6:30 p.m.
Okay, I set up your event titled Flight for today at 6:30 p.m. Are you ready for me to schedule it?
Yes. I think you have the idea. What's true here is we're no longer just dealing with functions that are in the device. We're going back to the network, or in this case, the giant collection of servers that's called the cloud. So today, Siri, an application on Apple OS things, handles voice, spoken voice. It tries to recognize what you're saying, it tries to figure out what to do with that, and come up with an intelligible response. Sometimes it actually works. Imagine what would happen if you could not only talk to systems, but the systems could be even more aggressive than what a Kinect does. If you recall from the previous discussions, the Kinect figures out your model, but it doesn't recognize you. But there are already companies with services in the cloud for recognizing faces, and in some countries those services are actually illegal. They're actually already too good. They're actually pretty good at violating people's privacy. Get used to that. So, up in the cloud, there is functionality that captures the input, whatever it is, voice or pictures, distributes it to pattern recognition servers, collect the responses back from within the cloud, process the recognized results, meaning if I speak nonsense to Siri, it won't handle it or may ask me for more information. Figured out what I want to do with that. And if we had enough information for face recognition, a lot more applications are possible. I haven't heard many questions yet.
Well, I want to ask questions, and then we'll be engaged and will not be afraid to ask you questions.
Fair enough. What would you do to the products that you're working on if you had access to voice recognition? That's a question for you, sir.
I'll use 4-letter words with her and see what she says.
If you don't mind, I'm going to pass up on that particular application. Anyone else?
You may want to change your screen. Is that the screen you want to display that?
I could switch back.
I have bad experience with Siri. She does not understand my accent.
I have a fellow on my team who's from Glasgow. It has a lot of trouble with Christchurch. There's some other languages it probably has trouble with. I would imagine that some future version of it will allow you to set where you think your accent is from so it won't get so lost.
And another one is that she cannot handle a conversation. She forgot what she says a minute ago. So she only answers, you let us question, and if it's a conversation, she has to remember, but she doesn't.
Right, well, Siri was not, there's a famous Turing test, right? And then in the Turing test, you have a conversation with a system and you can't tell that it's not a machine. Siri does not meet that criteria. On the other hand, how many of you like to watch The Big Bang Theory TV show? I bet there's more than one. I'm surprised. In season 4, there was an episode where the Rajesh Kutrapali character fell in love with Siri. He tried to have a dinner with her. It didn't work. Anyway, I'm going to move on. So, suppose we start instrumenting ourselves. This product here, with a little adapter, talks to that device on the shoe. So the shoe can keep track of how many steps you're taking, right? Polar sells these, a bunch of other companies sell these. All right, so I went last month And I bought this little thing, which is called a Fitbit. It has sensors that can tell when I'm active and when I'm not, and it keeps track of them. And it has a small rechargeable battery in it. It connects by Bluetooth Low Energy to my iPad. And it produces daily and weekly plots of how much activity it's detected. So, here's what my Fitbit said about Saturday. It said I took, 9,832 steps. I climbed 9 floors. I traveled 4.3 miles. I burned 2,400 calories. Great day. And I had a certain activity score. So, people could use this privately to instrument themselves now. However, things like this get used in other places. I was on the floor last week talking to an engineer. I don't think he wants me to reveal who he works for. For years, he's been building proprietary low-energy radios to do exactly this kind of thing on employees at U.S. companies and other companies to keep track of the activity levels of their staff. How many of you were at the keynote 2 mornings ago? Mary did a terrific talk on, I think, effective computing. They were measuring how you feel and measuring your levels of activity. And I was impressed that she was coming up with a useful application of this thing. But it could go the other way. I was talking to the AV technician here 2 hours ago, and he said, "Oh my God, what if my company made me wear one of these things so they can check me every day and see how active I've been?" This scared him. Now, my nurses, I'm in cardiac rehab because I had surgery a few months ago, and she would probably love to see this information on me every day, and she would start pushing me to do more and more, as she already does by looking at my weight and my heart rate and all these other things. Here's another application. This is more health than fitness. So this is what's called a pulse oximeter. I hope that most of you have not yet had a chance to wear a pulse oximeter. But I, in surgery, had this on constantly. And what it does is it shines light through my finger and looks at the blood in my finger and estimates what the oxygen saturation is in my blood. And in this application, there is a pulse oximeter sending out Bluetooth Low Energy, and here's a cell phone sitting right next to it, putting out a series of unintelligible reports. They're unintelligible because of the resolution of the camera that I used, not because you couldn't see them. When I was sitting there in recovering from surgery, having things like this around would greatly reduce the amount of clutter and cables and wires across my body. It might have been slightly easier to roll, for example. I would have appreciated that. So, how many of you attended the talk given about the Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize? That might have been a CES talk, not an ICCE talk. I'm really impressed with what Qualcomm is offering to finance, which is the development of useful instrumentation around ourselves. So, here's what instrumenting people might look like. So you have an application client, e.g. a smart radio phone, local wireless link, could be Bluetooth, could be proprietary, could be ANT. And within the Bluetooth world, which is where I live, the Bluetooth SIG has already standardized 2 sets of standards for measuring things. For the new low energy and generalized attribute access protocols. You've got heart rate, blood pressure, pulse oximeter, blood glucose, runner speed and cadence, cycling speed and cadence, and thermometer. These are the ones that we've shipped. There's at least that many also in development. What I'm particularly excited about is, given blood glucose measurements. One of the devices is an effector, which basically injects insulin. I'm a father who's been fighting diabetes for a long time. A combination system with the blood glucose sensor and the insulin injector means he's now free of the doctors. His body externally will modulate, will control things that were formerly controlled by his pancreas. This is a really big deal. Now, using classic Bluetooth, we came up with a method that maps standard IEEE 11073 specifications for lots of different health devices over Bluetooth. And those are shipping today from a lot of different companies. For reference, I point you to the Continua Alliance. Have any of you ever heard of the Continua Alliance before? There's a whole section of the floor at CES devoted to people who work with that stuff. Anyway, questions before? Yes, sir.
Do you think it's actually healthy to know your situation in a quantitative way all the time?
As a matter of fact, I don't. I think that the first problem with that is, do you know what to do with those numbers? I can get up every morning and I can take my thing that I take vitals with, and I can measure these numbers. And if I don't know what to do with those numbers, at worst it might just confuse me because it won't stick. At worst, it could convince me to do something that isn't actually helpful for me to do.
And at worst, I see another worse aspect of that now you get your brain into that, and actually it will affect you negatively.
I missed some of the words. I need to give you the microphone.
It might affect you negatively through your
Oh,
mind.
yes.
Okay? So I'm not sure. There was an article about it, about quantifying your life, but the question is it so good for you to know your exact situation, the numbers, all the time, and actually it is only a partial picture?
Was this the article that was in Spectrum recently?
No, not the Spectrum, not in an engineering magazine. I can send you the link.
Okay, there was an article on this subject in the IEEE Spectrum. I think it was the December issue, maybe November. Some woman instrumented herself. In fact, she used this little Fitbit kind of thing. It was one of the things she used.
Yeah, but that was written by an engineer, so.
Okay. That means it's less intelligible, but it might be more interesting. Cool. Okay, I would like that. Anyway, this is how the system might fit together. So, the last thing I would like to approach is the largest thing that we buy or rent, our homes. I don't want to think about how much I paid for the house I live in, but it was very significant. And it is not what I would consider to be a smart house by any means. This is a vision. So I talked to a company called Green Peak, and with their permission, I took a photograph of one of their displays to put up. So this system is the software that animates home security systems marketed by Comcast and some of the other cable providers. And so this is an example of how they think of things. They use Zigbee and Zigbee-derived radios, 802.15.4 base radios, and to talk to systems around their house. And RF4CE is their remote control standard. Zigbee Pro is the main connection standard. And Zigbee IP is the extension of IP directly to sensors. I talked to the engineer. He says, you know, that Zigbee IP stack is really big. If you put all that functionality into the sensor, it's not low power anymore. As a Bluetooth LE guy, I agree with him. The Bluetooth people themselves are taking a related tack, except to get whole house coverage, you use Wi-Fi as the backbone, and you build gateways from Wi-Fi to Bluetooth Low Energy or any other radio you want. So, if you were to fit all these things together, they might backbone, internet access comes in through the broadband modem, It can talk to the infrastructure in the house over home plug. Those are standard things. It could talk to the rest of the devices with Wi-Fi. Those are common, so common that they're frequently built into the broadband modems now. It can talk to native Wi-Fi devices. There are companies that were showing things on the floor this last week that were scales that talked directly over Wi-Fi to the rest of your system. You can talk to a Wi-Fi Zigbee gateway to native Zigbee devices. You can talk through a Wi-Fi Bluetooth Low Energy gateway to native Bluetooth Low Energy devices. But let me back up. People have been talking about smart houses for a long time. I've been approaching it from the ground up of how do I get all these things to connect to each other. But that doesn't explain at all why they have been a commercial failure so far. I think that's because there's a lot of different ways to think about what is a smart house. One way is it sustainable some way? Does it save me money on energy? One is it aware? Does it know what's going on? Can it do useful things? Can it vacuum itself? And that's never mind. We had a keynote this morning talking about the future of televisions. And it was talking about how I could be watching something on a device, and I move to a different room and it transfers to that other device and so on. That's making my TV watching experience more convenient. I don't know how much effort I want to put into personally in something that makes me sedentary when the Fitbit is telling me I should be moving more often. Capiche? But there are two main categories. Can I save energy and what's more convenient? There's a hierarchy published by one author who says you can sort the latter group in the following ways. The simplest is homes which contain intelligent objects. If you were to go to a very rural place somewhere with no electricity, you probably wouldn't have any intelligent objects in that house other than perhaps the people in them. But a lot of us have devices with lots of microprocessors in them. The next level would be homes that contain intelligent and communicating objects. So something talks to something else. One of them, the next level might be things that are connected to the outside world. We don't yet have a lot in the way of houses that learn from what we've done, but I predict they'll happen. And you could even have a home that is, whether you like it or not, attentive. If you had been listening to Mary's keynote from a couple of mornings ago, imagine she was talking about having a place where the wall covering changed its texture in response to your mood. Of course, I would worry about what happens if there's multiple people in the room and it doesn't know which one to focus on. But you got the basic idea. So, there's another problem with that, and I quote this cartoon. So, the author of this editorial from 12 years ago said, he's been on the scale in the bathroom, and he's been in front of the mirror, and the refrigerator, which is a cross between refrigerator and Hal, says, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. The bathroom scale and the hall mirror are reporting disturbing flab abnormalities. So it won't get a beer. So there are unintended consequences if your house is networked and aware and wants to intervene in your life. So, I want to close with a couple. Figure that, first of all, future consumer devices can be aggressively smarter. They will have better ways of listening to you. They will have better ways of watching you. They will have better ways of processing that information in any functions that can be moved to the cloud. They might network themselves, e.g. the scale in the refrigerator I just talked about. They can share that information with the cloud unless we find ways to prevent it and maintain our privacy. Warning.
How about they would be able to understand you, to know you? Not just
If Siri is...
about you. Siri is really dumb as she is now. Maybe we can educate her over years. She
I
doesn't
predict-
remember the sentence you said a minute ago.
I predict that they'll share that information with the cloud, not only in terms of the things that you asked for, but they'll be sharing what you asked for with other agencies or within their own company. And again, I'm concerned about privacy issues. In the cloud, data scientists will find lots of ways to mine that data for good or for ill. So, my calls to action. Consider the products that you work on now. Where is the intelligence now? Where could you add it, and why? Given your planned future product roadmaps, the things that you're all thinking about, how would you use this view of intelligence to improve your product plans? Maybe it's simply that you're now aware of it and hadn't been thinking about it before. Now it's explicit. If you have a reliable network connection, you could consider using the cloud as well as stuff that's native to the device. And you can leverage that network of devices around yourself, in your car. I left cars out of here because they move. In your living room, in your house. More questions? Please? I had one shill over here. I need more. Especially one that uses a microphone. I would observe I'm grateful that I haven't noticed anyone sleeping. I sometimes do that after lunch. No other questions? Two things. I don't have a lot of business cards, but if you want to contact me, I'm going to dictate twice my email address. JDECUIR@IEEE.org. I'll repeat it later. So, I included some user interface, medical apps, and smart energy profile references. I can leave this here for a couple of minutes in case you want to write something down. I don't know if they publish these things or not. One more time. My email address, JDECUIR@IEEE.org. Thank you for your questions, sir. I need those. If there are no other questions, I'm going to hand the floor back to Robin.